So we're slightly taken by surprise because we're starting 10 minutes early. It's amazing. Hi everyone. Look, my name's Ian Gibbs. I'm Director of Data Leadership and Learning at JICMAIL. If you don't know who JICMAIL are, we're the joint industry currency for mail, and we're here to provide trusted, independent, credible sort of planning metrics for the mail industry. So I'm talking about direct mail, business mail, door drops. We provide those kind of bread and butter media planning metrics like reach and frequency for mail planning. We also measure full funnel effectiveness for mail as well, and increasingly newer variables like attention, as we were just hearing about. But over the course of the last couple of years, we've also been convening a debate and conversations around measurement as well. Last year, we partnered with the DMA and released an associated white paper called Minding the Measurement Gap, where we explored some of the challenges in the measurement world today and sort of had a discussion about what we can do about that. We had a conversation about it this time last year at the MediaTel event, and we just want to sort of progress that conversation today. Last year, quite frankly, there was a lot of moaning about how difficult stuff is, and I'm sure we'll do a little bit of that today. But I suppose what we want to come out of today with is also perhaps some practical advice and guidance about what we can do about all of this. So, got a great couple of panellists. Perhaps I could just ask Emma and the guys, perhaps you could just introduce yourself quickly.
I'm Emma Scoular. I head up the effectiveness department at Manning Gottlieb OMD and Omnigov. So that's our team looking at everything in terms of how effective our media is, how we're measuring that properly, and how we're making sure that our learnings are being fed back into our planning and our strategy.
Fantastic. And Carl?
Cool. I'm Bratton. I head up the marketing effectiveness team at Direct Line Group, and I'm also the co-chair of the ISBAR effectiveness group.
Okay, so perhaps, Carl, we could start with you. I mean, it'd be good to get a sense of whether you think, I guess, proving marketing effectiveness in the boardroom, or perhaps I say measuring, we don't presuppose the outcome. Measuring marketing effectiveness, has it become a sort of a more difficult conversation or a harder task in the last couple of years, or has it got easier because there's sort of newer methodologies and technologies on the market?
Yeah, so I think it's become more of a focus, which I think is a really positive thing, that actually the boardroom are talking about marketing and the impact that marketing can have. So I think that's the first good thing. I think the worry, or the potential worry, is that a little bit of knowledge is dangerous. We had a marketing offsite where an ex-co member had quoted he'd listened to a podcast and we didn't know what we were doing. So that was good at a marketing offsite. But I think for us it's more about really talking, making sure that if those conversations are happening, that we're being represented in it and we're talking the business language. So actually we're being quite single-minded when we talk about objectives, and also we're talking commerciality. So we can talk about premiums or gross profits and things like that, rather than brand objectives. So actually trying to take it to business.
Okay, so it's taken a bit more seriously, which is a good. What do you think, Emma?
Yeah, I completely agree. I believe that in marketing we do have to get better at the language of the boardroom. It's becoming a greater conversation there, but again, I think with the information that's available, it can quickly and easily move into a shift to maybe efficiency, possibly short-term effects, and that can move away from some of the good work that's being done in marketing and comms. So again, we need to move into that boardroom language. We need to understand what the boardroom is looking to deliver and show them how that translates through, and be very clear on when to expect results as well, and have clear ways to demonstrate that so that the boardroom feel comfortable in getting the results as they come through, and they feel very clear that the marketing team are clear on how the methods in which they're doing that. So again, maybe a bit of education, but speaking their language is really key.
And so, imagine we're starting from scratch and building up our sort of marketing measurement capabilities. If we were to offer some practical guidance and tips to people, where would you start from if you were to build your measurement capability from scratch? Now, I suppose I'm talking about the people or the technologies or the methodologies. What do you think, Carl? So
for me, people is key.
Yeah.
I think we need to ensure that we develop our people, that we're looking for the right people that help us with the problems that we're solving. I think you can change the kind of people and the mix of people that you have over time as your journey changes. But I think that's the kind of key thing to really focus on. That allows you then to think about if you in-house or use a third party and things like that. But it's actually how are you trying to tackle things? What is the key thing that you need to tackle? And then you can mould it around people.
Yeah, okay. But it's quite hard to find the right talent these days, though, isn't it?
It is. It's a big pain. And it's a big thing that we're kind of focusing on within ISBA as well. I think there are obviously a number of agencies that are looking to expand their team still, but you've also got more advertisers as well that are doing that. So it's a continuous kind of process.
What do you think, Emma?
Yeah, it is very hard. I think going back to the first question we had, there's a shift in looking for maybe a more holistic skill set, and maybe a more consultative way where people feel comfortable understanding how businesses work and what the big levers are that they need to be pulling, but also have maybe that expertise in how to use the data, how that works with different methodologies. So finding individuals in that space is becoming more difficult but more sought after. I think, as Carl mentioned, there are a number of media owners and clients also moving that in-house, so there's more competition for those individuals as well. So definitely more competitive to have that kind of more rounded knowledge of both data, measurement, but also how businesses work and how you connect those two together.
And what about, so we talked about the people, what about the methods that people are using? I mean, you know, there's been sort of lots of news recently about the sort of Meta and Google shift away from attribution towards MMM. I mean, is MMM, you know, is that the sort of panacea for everything? Does it do everything we need it to? Is that where we should start? Or, you know, what do you think, Emma?
There is a shift, probably rightly, because of the kind of privacy-first move to measurement. And we're looking for more ways that can be more holistic. So MMM is excellent for that. It allows us to take into account, you know, all media and other variables. And it is becoming more agile. It is becoming a lot more affordable. So there is more of a spotlight on that as we move away from things like attribution. I think the watch out there is that moves us into space of looking at how channels are being effective, but maybe we are moving away from that consumer journey. So understanding maybe the order in which people are taking actions, understanding that from a media perspective, understanding the frequency, the order in which consumers are able to do that. So I think rightly there's a move to that methodology that is becoming more accessible. But I think in doing that, we need to be aware of some of the gaps that have been lost because of the move to privacy first. So I think that's why we are seeing the rise in more methods around understanding how channels work together. We talked earlier about attention, those metrics there, how are channels being measured in that way to bridge that gap that I think the previous attribution has lost.
What do you think, Carl?
Yeah, I mean, I've been around long enough for at least 2 periods when attribution was going to have killed marketing mix modelling, and it's still not happened. But I think for me, it's probably more of an and rather than an or. So actually, there's been conversations this morning and people talking, you know, about knowing the roles or understanding the roles that you have for each of your media kind of approaches. So econometrics is great, or marketing mix modelling is great for the overall holistic piece. We just talked about test and learn and the kind of stuff, the great stuff that Dreams are doing. And then actually the role that attribution has within trying to understand which publisher sites might be best to use. But I think it's the combination of all three rather than trying to compete against one another.
Yeah, sure, okay. I mean, this idea of test and learn, and what sort of hypotheses should people be focusing on at the moment? I mean, it feels like we're also quite sort of unique environment at the moment, this sort of environment of stagflation, you know, the economy's not really growing, we're seeing huge levels of consumer inflation. Does this sort of present sort of unique measurement challenges or unique hypotheses that we want to test with our consumers, do you think?
Cool. So I think it's great what the guys at Dreams is kind of seeing, really. You know, it's the fact that I think the broader picture is that marketing mix modelling and test and learn give you a result at that time, but you need to continue to test things, understand how things change and evolve over time. So I think it's the fact that the stagflation, COVID and everything like we've had over the last 3 years has not really been a normal year. So actually trends have changed, media consumption habits have changed, so we need to continue to understand, you know, what the role of test and learn is, and kind of evolve that over time from maybe using it to kind of validate econometric results or marketing mix modelling results that we've seen in the past to kind of then going, how can you test this for new media lines or kind of trying to understand incrementality that way.
Sure. What do you think?
I think incrementality is key, and I think test and learn, it's really important to have a test and learn framework set up and have a roadmap to that and make sure that in terms of test and learn that is being measured in a way that is being used, but also you can look back even over a number of years and saying, did we test it before? What happened? How has that changed? I think the kind of watch out with test and learn is it can become very granular in looking at short-term efficiencies, for example, or optimizing, say, certain placements or how certain channels are doing. And I'm keen to take test and learn into more of, again, moving up into the kind of outcomes space. So how can we deliver test and learn at scale, which is going to show us how we can drive shifts in the actual business outcomes or particular outtakes, as well as more of efficiency driving and optimization. So I think test and learn is really key, and that should be set up in a kind of structured way, but that we shouldn't just be looking at kind of optimization in test and learn. We should be applying it to other areas, and as we said, that can help validate more holistic methods as well, like MMM.
So that's interesting. So that's drawing together some of these strands then. So this tendency of test and learn perhaps to focus on efficiency. We've talked about sort of attention efficiency earlier, but we've also talked about this need to talk in like business-centric metrics in the boardroom. I mean, is attention like an appropriate metric to talk about the boardroom? Is it a measure of effectiveness? Is it a measure of efficiency? Is it just a proxy outcome? What do you think?
For me, I think it's interesting and good that we are moving from media metrics into attention, because what we're trying to do is bridge that gap where previously we looked at media measurement and delivery and tried to connect that to outtakes and outcomes. We're trying to move that delivery into that mid-space where we're talking about the experience people are having and how that then impacts those outcomes. So we're trying to elevate that shift, and we have seen studies, particularly from Ubiquity, where we've seen a direct correlation with attention driving incremental revenue. So we know that is a space that everyone is keen to look into. I think we have to be careful as well about how we're measuring that. At the moment, it's very much focused on eye tests, so how long we're looking at things, but we know that audio is particularly good at driving attention in different ways. We should be thinking about kind of active attention versus passive. Should we be looking at short-term effects from it, but also what might be the longer-term effects from it. So I think there's a lot to do in that space, but it's a good challenge that we're trying to move media delivery and metrics into that slightly in between space between outtakes and outputs, I guess so.
What do you think, Carl?
Yeah, I think it starts to empower some of our so whats. So actually, if we think about marketing mix modelling, and we've had lots of conversations all day about how slow it can be and you know, things like that, but it's actually about, if we focus it on the so what and actually what we're going to do differently, I think kind of using the likes of the attention metrics allows us to have different conversations. So I think the question that we had about dreams and, you know, trying to hit different audiences, this is the, you know, that starts to bring it to life a little bit.
It's interesting. I can still imagine it sort of catching the eye of a CMO, but still, I've spoken to some very cynical CEOs and say, how's this campaign performed? Well, we generated, you know, 500,000 seconds worth of attention. I can imagine a shrug of shoulders sometimes. It's a tricky balancing act, I should think, depending on the audience.
Yeah, I think that's what it comes back to, like my answer to the first question, that little bit of knowledge. You know, if they're hearing about attention, they're hearing TV's dead and things like that, they're some of the conversations or questions that you can get from the boardroom.
Yeah. Got any questions from the audience at all before we move on? Got about 5 minutes left. Yes, over here. Can we get a mic over here? Yeah.
What would you need to link attention to an actual behaviour? So, as you said, the CMOs will shrug and go, well, that's nice. What would you need to actually link attention to a meaningful behaviour?
Do you mean in terms of what sort of methodologies or what?
Yeah. I mean, what sort of data would you require to link it to footfall or sales?
Yeah.
So I think you started to see some adjusted TVR data with attention. So some of the media agencies that we've spoken to are starting to do that. So rather than just using broad TVRs like we've talked about with the Barb data in the past, they're starting to apply those attention metrics to that as well.
I think it probably comes down to finding, you know, the holy grail is always single source data, isn't it? So, you know, if you have, I mean, speaking from JICMAIL's experience, you know, we have commercial effectiveness data, which tells you how a piece of direct mail or a door drop drove a specific outcome. We started measuring attention so we can cross-reference the two. And I imagine if you're Barb or Kantar World Panel or any source of interesting media planning or effectiveness data, what you need is that attention point so you can start cross-referencing. Single source data has to be the outcome. But I imagine everyone's probably looking into this and thinking about whether these correlations exist. I guess it's the difficulty is deciding whether actually one's driving the other. It's the causation, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm from Viewers Logic, and we do single source data. And what we're finding is there's very different impacts after attention. And not all attention is equal.
Yeah, of course.
And being able to isolate an individual person to say they saw this and then they did that, we're finding that it's a very interesting thing to look at, but we're starting to see big differences in that, because we are the only people to measure one to the other. So I think that's where we need to be looking a lot more.
Interesting, thank you. Any other questions at all for our panel? Well, guys, I mean, another question from me. I mean, we, in our measurement white paper last year, a lot of our panelists talked about quite sort of siloed practices between different teams, in advertisers, in agencies, also between advertiser and agency, which really hampered measurement best practice. There was a particular comment around like sort of failure to share like sort of proper hard numbers from the advertiser with the agency, so everyone's flying slightly blind. I don't know if you guys have experiences in that, or how you can sort of talk about how you overcome those challenges at all, or if it resonates, that kind of particular challenge.
Yeah, I mean, coming from an agency side, we've definitely seen, you know, both ends of the spectrum here, and I think it is really important to work with your clients and their suppliers, both to educate, but everybody be clear what the common goal is. And sometimes there can be misconceptions, as you say, when you go up to that boardroom. If we're talking about communications, they're saying, well, that's only affects, you know, 12% or 15% of ultimately what we do. We have other business levers that are much stronger than that. So, you know, we don't really see the importance of that or why that should be necessarily linked through. But equally, if everyone is clear on what the outcome is and everyone is clear on what we need to achieve, it should be about demonstrating in each of those levers, communications being one of them, its role in that and how that connects back up. Because as an agency, if you're being asked to say, your campaign, please just drive consideration for this audience, but you don't need to know about how much, because we need to know how much that consideration is then going to drive the action or maybe the sale. But if we're not clear on how that dial is moving for the business, because that's not being shared, we're kind of hitting a blank spot, and we may think that we've done a great job, we've reached everyone, the consideration's gone up, but maybe the sales haven't moved. Why is that? Is there anything more we could be doing? Could communications be working better alongside other business levers to work together harder and create more of a synergy? So I think having everyone on the same page, having those shared goals and understanding how the different levers work together is really key. And by not sharing certain data, you can miss opportunities to connect that data, to look at different methods that do that, and you start to work in silos. So we have clients that do that very well, but we've also seen clients that maybe have not really connected those together, and might be down to the way that businesses are set up internally as well, because there are silos on that side as well as sometimes on agency and supplier side.
Sure, interesting. What do you think, Carl?
So we've got external effectiveness partners and external, obviously, media partners as well, or media agency, sorry. And what we do is we ensure that the two of them lean in. So actually, it's those guys as well as us, so the three of us need to lean in to kind of get the best outcomes. And actually, kind of what we tried to do at DLG is create kind of more of an internal consultancy from the effectiveness team, and the license being that everyone's got an opinions, and actually friction isn't always a bad thing, because actually we'll all have an opinion. It's about the debate that we can have to try and get to the best outcome. But actually we ensure that our media agency partners lean into all of the debriefs that we do. We ask them to take kind of the econometrics results to kind of think about how they might influence the plan as well. So we need them as key stakeholders within that to make sure that we're really kind of not just looking backwards, but kind of focusing on the so what's.
Okay. Well, look, finally, guys, running out of time, I think I'd love to get just sort of one sort of piece of practical advice from you for those that you'd like to offer marketers trying to sort of plug the various gaps in their measurement plan. Like one piece of practical advice. What do you think, Emma? What would you say to people?
Plugging those gaps, I think it's really important to go back to what it is you're trying to achieve. So you really need to ladder back from what success looks like, what those outcomes are, and make sure that you are measuring the right things first to then understand where your gaps are. Ask yourselves, what are those challenges we still can't explain? Are there things that are happening and we just don't know what is causing that or how to explain that? And does it really matter? Because if it matters, I think then you can work back and look always holistically at all the different levers that can do that, and step through and look at gaps that way. So just, I think, being clear on your objectives, being clear on what success looks like, and then working back from that to look holistically across the different methods that you've got in place and the data that you've got available.
Great, okay.
So I was going to say the same, so I'll change it. I think it's more about then think about where your media measurement team sit within the business and what the role or the accountability is that you give them. You know, give them the role to challenge, give them the role to be truly independent, and I think that's when you'll get the best from them. So it comes back to the people bit that I was talking about earlier.
Good stuff. Great advice. Well, look, Emma, Carl, thank you very much. Guys, if you want to talk about JICMAIL or you want to talk about measurement, do come and find us in the coffee break. But yeah, thank you for your time. Cheers.
Thank you.